What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ben and Walker Movie Show. I'm your co-host Ben Davis, joined by my other co-host Walker Holt, and we're excited to have a conversation with you about one of our favorite things in the world, all things spooky season. Wouldn't you agree, Walker? I know that spooky season is like your favorite time of the year, especially horror movies
You
in
know,
general.
it's not, but I am always ready for it. Still, we've had a hot summer, we've had a rainy summer, we've had a humid summer, and I'm ready for a nice fall, crisp uh, weather. We do have the windows open. Hopefully, you can't hear that lawnmower. Um, I am in the mood for some horror stuff and some Octoberness. Not that I was watching that this morning, but I did wake up, opened all the windows, and I've been watching the World Dog Surfing Championship all
That's
morning
a thing.
until it ended. Oh yeah, you got dog surfing, you got dog human tandem surfing, where you got to have at least one human, at least one dog. Sometimes they'll get fancy with it. Sometimes they'll ride backwards. Sometimes they'll ride holding each other's hands, both standing paws, both standing up. Then you got dog, where you have at least two dogs on there, but sometimes I'll have up to five dogs on there riding it, and
How
it was
do they
exciting.
do that?
Um, they're just good boys or girls, and they it was fun to watch. That's not very fall like, but it was a nice Saturday morning thing until it ended. Then more folly was roof ball. I think it might have been the World Championships roof ball. ESPN put some
What are you
weird shit
watching
on the
this?
Saturday mornings, Sunday
Is it
mornings.
ESPN 8, the
So
Ocho?
yeah, roof ball. They throw like a rugby ball at the roof, and they have to hit this like an intake pipe or like a gas pipe up there, you know what I mean? And it's got to, like, if it hits it a certain way, it's 5 points. If it gets stuck on, it's 5 points. If it goes over the roof, that's like minus 5 points. And then you have to catch the ball when it comes. You know how you throw balls on the roof, have to catch them when they come back down. It's like
Yeah.
that, but it's a football, and footballs or a rugby ball, and they take weird hops. So there's and it's raining, stakes are high. It's been a wild morning. I'm exhausted from the
It sounds like a
intensity.
whirlwind of excitement, to be honest with you. What it sounds like. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm ready
But
for fall. I mean, it's kind of like that here in Missouri. In the mornings, it's a little crisp, but by the afternoons, it's up in the 70s. Although, looking at the weather this upcoming week, uh, it's looking more like fall weather, and I'm pretty freaking excited. I'm pretty freaking excited. Fall
yeah.
is my favorite time of year. Although I love spring, summer, and winter as well. I love all the seasons, but fall in
Yeah.
particular. That that flannel weather, as I call it, where I have it's an excuse for me to
Burgundy
wear.
T-shirt weather.
Clearly, it's that time of year. Great minds think alike. Um, yeah, and also I love horror movies, and I love just watching them this time of year. Because then I watch the horror movies. I always say this on. I shouldn't say I always say this, but this time of year, I usually always say that I watch horror movies in October, and then I kind of transition into fantasy movies in November, and then I transition to Christmas movies by the time I get to December. And so it's a nice little
Yeah,
flow
you
of
gotta
genre there.
you gotta kind of not a lot of Thanksgiving options if you're not gonna make up your own kind of what it feels like. I mean,
Uh,
I guess you got Planes, Trains. Maybe Knives Out has a Thanksgiving vibe.
yeah,
The first one,
yeah, not the second one.
that's just because there's leaves and pretty much Planes, Trains. That's about it.
Well, there's
Oh well,
the
the new Thanksgiving or
yeah.
carving
Yeah,
horror movie.
Thanksgiving,
I'm not
the
watching
Eli
that.
Roth movie. It's actually good. I think you might like it. I think you might like it. It's actually
I don't believe you.
it's I don't it's solid. I promise. I actually really did have a good
When
time.
do you watch that? You watch that the day after Halloween?
Yeah, I'll probably watch it the day after Halloween, and that'll be the only time I watch it because I'm not gonna watch it that close to Christmas. I don't think.
They're
It'd
they're
ruin
they're
the plot.
making a second one, aren't they?
Probably. I would assume. I would assume Borderlands did not do too well, so I imagine Eli Roth is gonna move on to that. Um,
Yeah.
but as I always say, guys, if this is your first time being here with us today, welcome. But also, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. And also give us a follow on our socials at Ben and Walker Movie Show so you can stay up to date with all the latest content that we have for you guys. And just in case I forget to mention it, always comment down below on YouTube to let us know your thoughts on today's show, as well as Spotify. They have comments on Spotify now. So please make sure you give us your honest thoughts and opinions. We really enjoy hearing the feedback. Um, but speaking of horror things and spooky season, today we're discussing the 1999 adaptation of the 1820 short story by Washington Irving, Sleepy Hollow, which is about a month away from celebrating its 25th anniversary. Sleepy Hollow is directed by Tim Burton and stars Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Miranda Richardson, Michael Gambon, Gasper Van Dien, Ian McDermott, Jeffrey Jones, Christopher Lee, Richard Griffiths, and Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman. If you aren't familiar with Sleepy Hollow, the plot synopsis reads like such according to Google. Set in 1799, Sleepy Hollow is based on Washington Irving's classic tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Faithful to the dreamy, costume bound world that Irving paints in his story, the film mixes horror, fantasy, and romance and features an extraordinary cast of characters that dabble in the supernatural. This plot synopsis is really weird. It's not like a really good one. Um, like if I were to break down the plot, essentially it would be Ichabod Crane gets sent to a small village in upstate New York to investigate a series of murders that involve the victims all being headless and getting their heads cut off. The town suspects the perpetrator of these crimes to be none other than the Headless Horseman. If I were to write the plot synopsis, it would be that, but no, let's just.
I I agree with you. I think that would be a much better synopsis.
Yeah, that's a weird synopsis there, Google. But I guess, I think the why we picked this movie to discuss today, aside from the fact that, I kind of hold you hostage each October and force you to watch these horror movies, and I don't feel bad about it because your reaction is always great. Um, but also, like, it's spooky season. It is the season to get into horror. And the thing about it is, like, horror is this genre that is so pliable and bendable that it has so many different subgenres within the genre itself. So you have horror slasher, a demonic possession horror, you have supernatural horror, you have monster horror, you have psychological horror. There's all sorts of stuff like campy horror, and then you have movies that, like, I don't know if this is an actual genre, but I call it this, where it's like fun horror, where it's like it's scary, it's spooky, but it's not so scary that you feel like you're gonna have to watch an entire season of Parks and Rec to, like, go to sleep that night and to wash your soul of the
Right.
nastiness. Um,
Yeah.
this movie kind of falls into that category for me, where it's like Evil Dead 2, or Army of the Dead, not Army of the Dead, but Army of Darkness rather, where it's like
Yeah.
fun campy horror. It's definitely horror, but it's fun. And
That's a good
yeah,
comp
it
between the Evil Dead 2 and 3.
yeah, it
Between Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2. That's a good comparable. I felt similarly watching it. Oh.
yeah, it's just it's a fun kind of, I don't want to call it zippy, but it's just it's a fun, like, watch, especially this time of year. It's very atmospheric, and it kind of gets you into the season without, again, feeling oppressively scary. It's the type of horror movie that, like, you would show like a 12-year-old, even though it's R rated, and you would feel fine showing a 12-year-old Sleepy Hollow because it would
Yeah.
freak them out and spook them out, but it wouldn't be like showing them The Exorcist, or like,
Right. Right. Right.
or
Right.
something like that. These are often the movies I find myself the horror movies I find myself watching this time of year. Are these like, I know horror's not your thing really, but is this the kind of horror movie that you like to watch this time of year, or is it something a little different?
This was not what I expected when I watched it. I mean, I know I don't want to skip ahead too far, but I don't know if I've watched this movie all the way through before this.
Really?
It yeah, I'm certainly familiar with it. It was 1999. It's just movie after movie, and it was a great year for
Oh yeah.
movies, and I certainly remember the trailer. I certainly remember thinking like, I mean, in that day I was 9 years old, 10 years old, and then probably going into middle school after that, and like that was like the time where like middle school was my probably favorite horror movie time. Like that was what you got.
Yeah.
You invited girls over and to sit in the playroom, like you had a couple guys and a couple girls, and you watch horror movies and you hope one of them gets scared and hold your hand, and uh and it was always hard. That's always what we picked. And I don't really, and maybe to look tough. Not sure what the logic was, but this always looked like the for some reason at that age, at that time in the trailer, it was like that's like top of the line scary movie for me.
Yeah.
Like just fantasizing about it. Like I thought it was even though I was watching shit like fear.com and other things that were probably more grotesque or scary, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it was it that just looked like, and it was R rated. It that was always something I like, and maybe I've rented it, maybe because I certainly remember the opening scene.
Yeah.
Um and maybe it was one of those nights that we had friends over watching it, and we stopped paying attention, started talking because I don't remember the majority of the
Well,
movie.
those are like always,
Watching it now.
again, this is the type of movie that you watch with a group of friends and stuff like that, or like that's like my favorite
Mm-hmm.
thing about horror movies is watching them with a group of people and seeing how they react. Watching a horror movie by yourself can be a little too freaky, but watching it with a group of
Yeah,
people is always fun. It lends to like a fun experience if you're at home or if you're in a theater. It's always the cool experience is to watch a horror movie with an audience.
yeah. That's why they're, yeah. I mean, that's the charm
Yeah.
of them. I mean, is watching them with other people and reacting as a group. So I don't know if this is the one. In the last couple years. I have noticed like just, I mean, like maybe Jordan Peele stuff that's not particularly that scary, but I would definitely at least.
Freaky.
I mean, I know you can get into a zillion
Yeah.
different genres. Really, it's not scary. It's creepy. It's
Yeah.
freaky. It's thrilling. It's whatever. I mean, whatever. Like we're gonna put it at Blockbuster.
Well,
It's
like I
gonna be under the
always
horror
say,
section.
horror and comedy are like the two most like
Mhm.
subjective genres because it's so interpersonal to you and your like what you find funny or what you find scary. Not everyone's gonna
Yeah, and
think
they're all,
this is scary, you know?
right, and they lend themselves to each other. They're both based on timing,
Hmm.
and they also, like we just mentioned, they're both probably best served with a group.
Hmm.
Like it's always more fun to watch a comedy and laugh with a theater full of people than it is to sit by yourself and laugh.
Totally agree.
Um,
Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted to go ahead and choose this one because we definitely have another one this month that it's not scary that we're going to talk about. It's definitely not scary. The next one we're going to talk about, but it is a Halloween movie. But this one is the real big horror movie that we decided we wanted to talk about this month, and I think I wanted to give it its justice because I think it's a very rewatch. Sleepy Hollow is a very rewatchable movie. It's very entertaining, but also like this is one of my favorite genre of the quote fun horror to watch this time of year. Um, it's especially atmospheric, and that's why I like it so much because it gets you into that fall creepy, forest mood. Like it's just dingy, creepy, spooky forest.
yeah,
Kind of gets you into the season, into that mood. And I often, this is one that I rewatch almost every year. Um, along with the Scream movies. Even though I wouldn't say Scream's fun horror, it's definitely slasher horror, but I rewatch those all the time and have a fun time watching them. It's a little bit of a different vibe though.
Yeah.
But one of the big things about this movie is that it is directed by Tim Burton. Um, Walker, I don't think you and I have ever talked about Tim Burton. I don't think.
I don't
Are
think
you a
so.
Tim Burton guy?
Well, I'm not. No, but I'm not anti Tim Burton. I don't. Um, I don't. Uh, Tim Burton is one of these directors, and like that is you typically divisive. Like maybe like Wes Anderson or something. I know they're not similar, but they're similar in like they definitely have a style.
Yeah.
And like if I'm a Wes Anderson guy, I've probably seen all the Wes Anderson movies because I like that style, or I don't, or I don't like that style. You know, what I mean, and you have a strong feeling one way or the other. And Tim Burton's probably the same way. For some reason, I don't fall into that camp. I've only seen like I'm looking at his filmography. The stuff I've seen, I most of it I like. I just don't like. It's not because of Tim Burton's like flair to it. Like, I mean, I like Batman '89, and I like Batman Returns. Um, I've I've actually never seen Beetlejuice. That's been on my list lately because of the sequel that's come out. Um, Edward Scissorhands, I like it, but I haven't seen it in 20 years. But I remember liking it. I've never seen Mars Attacks. We were talking about this movie today. I do not like Planet of the Apes that he made. I think that is absolute. That's terrible. And I love the original Planet of the Apes,
Hey
and I
guys, Bunch
really
of
love
apes
the
here.
new.
What's going on? It's my awful
I
impersonation of
love
Mark
it.
Wahlberg.
That's pretty. It's not bad. I love the original, and I really love the new ones. Did not like that one at all. Hate Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Love the original. Hate that one. Like the new one.
Yeah,
So
it's
kind
so
of a
funny
mixed
though. Like
bag. Sweeney
listening to his
Todd.
filmography, like listening to you rattle off about his filmography, like there's the thing auteur theory, right? I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like to me, if someone doesn't believe it exists, I want to show them something like a Tim Burton movie or like a Wes
Mm-hmm.
Anderson movie, a Zack Snyder movie, a Steven Spielberg movie, a James Cameron movie. You can tell that these filmmakers made these movies just by looking at them.
Yeah.
Tim Burton is one of these filmmakers where he really blends German expressionism with gothic aesthetic. It's very
Mm-hmm.
avant-garde. It's very, you can tell it's his movie just by looking at it and hearing you rattle off his filmography. Like, if you were to ask me, like, am I a Tim Burton guy? I'll go like, I like his stuff, but like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, classic. Beetlejuice,
Mm-hmm.
classic. I don't like love it as much as everybody else and put it on this high shelf, but I enjoy it. I watch it just about every year for Halloween. uh, Batman '89, of course. Like Tim Burton is responsible for kind of giving us some of the blueprint for what would be the modern day
Yeah.
comic book movie, and as well as inspiring a lot of Batman going forward. Edward Scissorhands is like a top 15, top 20 movie of all time for me. Love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Love that movie. And then you get Batman Returns. That's a weird freaking movie, but it's good. It's weird as hell, but it's good. It's got one of the sexiest performances of all time in it, Michelle Pfeiffer, Catwoman. But get after that you get Ed Wood, Mars Attacks, um, and then he was supposed to do Superman. Superman Lives, and then he does
Mm-hmm.
Sleepy Hollow instead. Um, and then after he does Sleepy Hollow, you mentioned that Planet of the Apes movie. Like that is a movie that I liked as a kid, and then I rewatched it
Mm-hmm.
when I was like 12, and I didn't like it,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to watch this anymore because I want it to remain special in my kid heart, and I don't want to ruin it for adult me.
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
fair. Yeah. Andrew, I remember Andrew had the DVD, and that
And
was
DVD was great.
a
I
thing. I
had
mean,
the action figures.
I
It was it was awesome. I had a
yeah.
Marky Mark action figure. I had a couple actually. It was like the 12-inch doll, and then you had the the 6-inch one where he was in the full get up. It was pretty cool. But just rattling off
Sweeney
his
Todd.
filmography. Yeah, Sweeney Todd's another good one.
I like that. I like the music in it.
Yeah,
And I hate Dumbo. I hated Dumbo.
I haven't seen
Um,
that one.
so I think, but like in general, like when we're comparing these people and their styles, I mean, like Wes Anderson, for me personally, I know we disagree on him, but I do like a lot of his movies, but like I'm gonna want to see a Wes Anderson movie because it's a Wes Anderson movie. I also like a lot of his movies, regardless. Like I like the script, I like the story. Uh, I like a lot of Tim Burton's films in here, but I am not gonna see a movie because it's a Tim Burton movie. Tim Burton does not sell the movie to me. There's just like I don't particularly love his style, just like Zack Snyder, but I do like some of his projects.
Yeah,
It's probably did he not do Nightmare Before Christmas? Am I making that up?
he did not.
Oh.
He was heavily involved in it, heavily involved, but he did not direct it, and that is a common misconception because it's Tim Burton's Nightmare
Hmm.
Before Christmas. He's heavily involved.
Is it?
Yeah, he's heavily involved in it, but he did not direct it. And because he's one of these guys that came out and like we just rattled off like his first couple of movies. It really wasn't until Planet of the Apes came out that the cracks in the armor started for him with critics because Planet of the Apes was not liked. Then you have Big Fish. Big Fish is incredible. That's a great movie. Um, and then Charlie and the Chocolate Factory made a lot of money. I actually really like it, but I am in the minority. A lot of people really hate that movie. Corpse Bride, which came out a few months after, really like that movie a lot too. I prefer that to Nightmare Before Christmas. Really good movie.
Mhm.
Sweeney Todd, really good movie. Love the music in it. Depressing as hell movie. But then he falls into the
It was
trap.
like piss.
Yeah. And it's filled with people who are
Piss
filled
with
with
ink.
shit. Yeah. um, Alice in Wonderland, Dark Shadows, and then Big Eyes, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Dumbo. He has Frankie and Weenie in between those, but like that was kind of his dip. And now he's kind of experiencing a little bit of a resurgence with Wednesday and people loving that, loving Jenna Ortega, and then Beetlejuice making a crap ton of money and being a
Hmm.
pretty damn good sequel. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny, really clever. Michael Keaton crushed. But like he's one of these directors that he kind of lost a little bit of his shine because he was pretty hit and miss, more miss than hit in the latter half of his career. But he's now getting a little bit of a resurgence with Wednesday and Beetlejuice. So
Hmm.
if people were to ask me, like, am I a big Tim Burton fan? Like, I would say probably not. But then rattling off his movies is like, I kind of am. I am a big fan of Tim Burton. I like his style, I like his aesthetic. I appreciate him as a filmmaker, even if I don't like the movies. They always feel like they're made by him. The only one that didn't really necessarily feel like it was made by him was Dumbo. Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I like him as a filmmaker, and he's someone who often collaborates with the same people. Um, in particular, the star of this
Yes.
movie, Johnny Depp. What do you think of their team up together, and where would like Sleepy Hollow rank for you?
I think their team up works. I think it's a good
Yeah,
match. I
yeah,
think it makes sense. They're made for each other. I mean, you know, they're both uh just oddballs a little
yeah.
bit that like to kind of you know take on interesting projects. And they both put major leave major footprints on their projects. Where you can tell they've been there. And I'd rank it high. I mean, I probably rank Edward Scissorhands number one, and probably this and and Sweeney Todd number two. Probably this too, Sweeney Todd three. I don't know. They're close. I haven't seen Sweeney Todd in a long time. I'm a musical guy. I remember I have a couple of songs on my phone. That's what reminds me of it all the time. But uh, outside of that, I know I just said the matchup works. I do agree with that. I either haven't seen anything else or don't like the rest of them. You
Yeah,
know,
there
like I don't like Charlie and the
seems to
Chocolate
be,
Factory.
especially, yeah, there seems to be like a diminishing returns level with it to some degree. Like, I think for me, Ever Hands would be clear number one. As I said, that's like a top 15 movie of all time for me. Top 15, top 20. Um, love
Mm-hmm.
that movie. And then I would probably put this. I really like this
Yeah.
movie a lot. Again, I watch it
Mm-hmm.
almost every year for Halloween, but I think I would put this, then Ed Wood, probably Corpse Bride, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Corpse Bride and Sweeney Todd, then Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Alice in Wonderland, and Dark Shadows. I actually would put Dark Shadows above Alice in Wonderland. I did not care for Alice in Wonderland at all. At all. Dark Shadows is kind of a. I have a soft spot for that movie because my mom loved the original like TV show and used to watch it
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And I went with her. I didn't go see this with her in the theater, but I watched it with her at home, and she loved it. And I have a soft spot for it, and I enjoy it for that factor. And I do find some of it to be pretty funny, but I acknowledge it's not necessarily the best, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. But there's a little bit of diminishing returns, but honestly, I'm looking at their team ups, and the only one that I would say I don't like is Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
That's the only one that
I haven't even seen
yeah,
that
that's
one.
the only one I do not like. But I would put this as at a number two. But speaking of this movie, when was the first time you saw it?
I don't know. I mean, it would have been between 2000 and 2002. And I when we knew we were going to watch it, I definitely don't remember it very well, but I was like, I'm sure I've seen it. And I was like, I'll watch it and it'll start to flood back to me. And the opening scene, particularly, was like, yep, I remember this. I remember this. And then I think I even remember, and it might be from the trailer, but I remember the scene with the flying pumpkin head, Jack Lantern
Yeah,
head. Um, uh, and so those are the only two scenes that came back to me though. So I may not have seen it all the way through, but it would have been 20 plus years ago for sure.
yeah. I so the first time I saw it, I remember like you seeing the trailer when I was a kid and thinking this looks awesome, And obviously, my mom's not going to take me to go. I think the only R-rated movie I saw in theaters, I had seen R-rated movies, but the only R-rated movie I'd seen in theaters was Deep Blue Sea, which was just a few months before this movie came out. Um, and I remember telling my mom I really want to see this movie, and she did not take me to go see it in theaters. And I remember getting really upset because she went to go see it, and she brought me back. I have this vivid memory of her make not making it up to me, but making me feel better by bringing me back some Sour Patch Kids. It was the first time I had Sour Patch Kids. Loved it. And I remember her telling me, she's like,
No.
listen, when it comes out on VHS or DVD, we'll rent it because I think you'll like it. So it was probably a year later or something like that. I watched it and really liked it. I watched it at home. I was probably 6 or 7, something like that. I was pretty young.
Mhm.
But I think I was like 6 or 7. So this came out in '99. So I was 5 years old, and then I turned 6. So I was around 6 or 7 when I saw this, and I liked it a lot. I remember liking it a lot. Um, and I didn't watch it again for several years after that, though. Um, it wasn't until I think I rented it. It became, I think it was like one of the last movies I rented from Blockbuster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before we got like on demand and stuff like that, and you could just rent movies from there. Um, that was one of the last movies I rented, and I went through a phase where we would return it and then rent it again. You have those favorites when
Hmm.
they don't have what you want, and then you're like, all right, I'm just gonna go get this one. Now This was one of those movies for me. But yeah, I really liked it as a kid, and then watching it now as an adult, 25 years later, like over the years, it became one of those movies that would kind of fit its way into uh, the series of movies that I rewatch often, especially this time of year because number one, I love Tim Burton as a filmmaker. Like I said, if people were to ask me, am I a Tim Burton guy? I would say, yeah, I like him. But now realizing, like looking at his filmography, it's like, no, I really like this guy. In fact, I love him as a filmmaker. And then Johnny Depp, like Johnny Depp a lot as an actor. I think he's a tremendous actor. But the thing about this movie that I love so much is the score, the aesthetic, and the feel and the vibe. Everything about it gets me in the spirit for Halloween. And it's, not fun like it, but it is. It takes itself seriously, but not so seriously. It's a little campy. It's very, it evokes a little bit of that like Hammer horror from those movies back in the day. It evokes a lot of that.
Yeah.
It's spooky. It's delightfully spooky and violent and goofy and just it's a good time. It's a good time, man. Watching this movie is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Watching it now. So I mean, it was not what I expected at all, which is the main reason I was like, oh well, I definitely haven't seen this all the
Yeah,
way through.
I'm interested to see.
Or maybe it's 20 years ago. I'm a different human being. I mean, it's hard to like compare. Now, I went on a bit of a roller coaster with it because my honest thoughts of it were I didn't find it, and I'm not as like nuanced as you are in horror, or maybe in general, but I didn't find it scary like at all. But maybe spooky's the right word. I mean, obviously it's the vibe. I
Yeah,
mean, it's foggy woods at night in the fall with a headless horseman cutting people up. Now it's my thoughts are going to be scattered here. I wish I had organized them better. It wasn't very scary to me. And at first that threw me off and it made me feel negatively about it. Not like, I know I don't particularly like scary, but I thought it was like, I thought it did a poor job of trying to scare me, I guess. And then as I went on, it kind of like owned itself as what it was. There was far more humor than I
yeah.
expected there to be. And then like some of the acting, it's just not what I expect. I didn't expect. I'm not as fluent in Tim Burton projects either. I didn't expect the vibe that it was going to give off, so it took me a minute to like realize a lot of things were intentional. I guess you know what I mean, like the humor, maybe some of the over the top
Yeah.
campiness, and things like that. And it took me a minute to like respect it because at first I thought it was like, oh man, this is cheesy, and then it turned
Part of the
into
charm.
it's part of the try. I understand it as it went on, so I went through a lot with it. It was one of my thoughts was like, is this really rated R? I guess there's some gore in it, but there is a little
Violent.
bit of gore,
Yeah.
especially when he's like inspecting the head. But it's yeah, there is some. It's funny. It's interesting. It surprised me throughout the movie. It surprised me. The level of scariness surprised me, but then the campiness, over the top humor surprised me, and I started to get used to it. And then we would go back to being pretty violent and pretty not serious. You know what I mean? I mean, it was like
It takes itself seriously when it needs
stakes.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was an interesting ride for me to go through it. So I'm glad I watched it. Um, I'm not gonna like walk away being like that was incredible. I want to watch it
Yeah.
again. I mean, maybe one day, but it's not gonna make my rotation yearly. But it wasn't what I thought. It was good. I like how they owned what it was. Eventually, it took me a minute to get there, but I like. I mean, they had a headless guy walking around, just kind of. They really like went for. There wasn't like this mystique with him. There wasn't this like you can barely see him. We're not gonna like give away. There wasn't this like imagination is scarier than real life. They're like we're gonna get a guy. He's gonna walk around without a head, and he's just gonna kind of
Yeah.
kind of be like menacing, but also kind of be kind of a
creepy
little
and
bit of like ghost
goofy.
face, like clumsiness to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just went for it, and I really appreciate that they went
Well,
for it. So
that's the
that's so
charm, and that's what makes it so damn entertaining. Is that it's not so self serious and dour, but it's also it takes itself seriously when it needs to. It has this great atmosphere to it, and again, a lot of like fun little quirky humor to it. That like little things like Johnny Depp constantly pushing the kid in front of him anytime there's something scary that happens, like hide behind the kid. Like it's just
yeah.
little details like that that give this movie a lot of life and a lot of charm and pizzazz that makes it very rewatchable, makes it on why it makes it onto my rotation yearly for this time of year. It just it evokes that like delightfully like spooky aesthetic that I really hope that my decorations and house during this time of year kind of evokes. It's not like so
Sure.
self-serious that it's like it's not so self-serious and it has fun with itself, so it's like a good party horror movie. Like a good Halloween party movie. Like it's just something fun to have on, and it perfectly nailed it because if you could do a self-serious version of this movie and it wouldn't be good.
I don't know. I I was, you know, after thinking about, I'm not super familiar with the short story. Like I mean, I'm familiar with its existence. I've probably heard it before. I understand there's a headless horseman. I understand the name Ichabod Crane. I wasn't even sure if Ichabod Crane was the headless horseman or the protag. I wasn't sure. Like I knew these words and names, but that was all I knew.
Yeah.
Um, After watching the movie, like it, if you did, if you didn't do it like this, it would be a tough swing to make it any good.
It's a tough
It
sell.
would be tough
Yeah.
to. Um, you'd have to make it. You'd have to change some stuff and make it just like brutal or something. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to. You'd have to. It's.
There's some brutal stuff in
They
this.
did a good job. Yeah, but it's never like
It's campy.
I don't know. Yeah, there's never a moment where like I'm. There was never a moment where I like was like shielding
Yeah,
myself or
yeah.
like
It's very again, it's very
scared
like
or
not the same, but it's very like Evil Dead 2, and you could do like a Evil Dead 2013 Fede Alvarez version and it wouldn't be as I don't know if it would be as good. It wouldn't be as fun. Like I'm not watching that
oh
movie all the time even though I think it is a very well-made horror movie and a very good movie at that. It accomplishes what it sets out to do. It's creepy. It's very metal. But which one am I going to rewatch more often? It's the Evil Dead 2 because it's got that camp to it, that flavor to it. Got a lot of personality to it. Not that that doesn't either. This is it feels very similar. It's very like got a lot of personality and campiness that makes it charming. Um, Delightfully spooky. I don't know. I don't know if a very serious version of this would really work. It'd be that's a tough sell. So maybe
yeah,
the Evil Dead
I agree. I
version,
don't I think it would.
the Evil Dead comp in terms of like Evil Dead 2013 compared to Evil Dead 2 isn't necessarily the greatest comp in the world because both of those versions work. I don't know if this would work. Um,
Yeah, it's also it's a pretty. I mean, it's a pretty soft R. I mean, from today's standards, do you think it's rated R today?
for the violence, yeah. I mean, there's
You think so?
yeah, because there's some straight up, I mean, graphic blood, like very bright red blood that that is
Yeah.
all over this movie. Um, but that would be it. That's the only reason. Like, there's
It kind of just feels like a like it would. It came to me like it would be a nice. It wouldn't be a might be like a bit of an intro to horror for some. You know what I mean? Like if like a 13-year-old or I don't know. I don't like. I don't
yeah,
know how old kids
it's a good
do things, but like one of the
it's a
first horror movies that aren't going to scar them or traumatize them, but get them like kind of that
yeah,
little jolt they're looking
give
for.
them that yeah, give them that spook you need, but it's not like creeping you out to the point to where you're like, okay, I
Ruined your life.
traumatized my child. Yeah, like it's not.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a good gateway horror movie because it's got some. It's again, it's just fun, and the critics seem to agree because the Sleepy Hollow critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes currently sits at 70%, with the consensus being it isn't Tim Burton's best work, but Sleepy Hollow entertains with its stunning visuals and creepy atmosphere. And I agree with that. It's not his best work, but it would be high up on the list for me. Um,
Yeah,
I think it would be high up on
I,
the list
I
for
I
me.
agree. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's high up on my Tim Burton list. Yeah, I mean, the score's reasonable. I'm actually a little higher than the score,
Yeah, I am too.
but so I'm probably. I mean, not much. I mean, I'm pretty close. I mean, I'm 74, 75,
Oh,
somewhere in that world after
I'd be
watching
like
it. But
80,
I,
85 for me.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
85.
definitely worth a watch for sure.
Absolutely. Um,
And certain people are gonna love it. I think certain people will love it more than others. But it's good.
yeah,
It's fun, especially if you can appreciate their purpose with it.
yeah. They totally hit the tone that they were going for perfectly. Um, let's get into some fun facts here, though, Walker. Johnny Depp did all his stunts for the final scene where he's dragged on the horse. He had a bulletproof clothing underneath his wardrobe, and I watched the behind the scenes on this movie, and it's so funny to see Rick. I think it's McKellen, the same guy who did the stunts for the Star Wars prequels, which is
Oh,
funny
really?
because this movie has a
Huh.
lot of Star Wars crossover because it's shot
Yeah.
directly after Star Wars Episode 1 in the studio, has the same stunt coordinator, has Ian McDiarmid, has Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee.
hmm So there's some Star Wars crossover there.
Yeah, I don't see a
Oh, and
lot
Ray
of
Park.
Emperor. Huh.
He played the headless.
He's in it.
He plays the headless horseman. So you don't see
Really?
his face.
That's
Yeah,
cool. I you don't. I don't see a lot of Ian McDermott when I'm. I can't think of a lot of his work, or maybe I haven't seen it, or maybe I just didn't notice it. Christopher Lee, you see him quite a bit, but I don't know. I mean, it was fun to see the Emperor. I was like, is that Sheev?
yeah. Sheev up to some stuff
I sent
again.
you a Sheev action figure the other day. Did you say you did have a Sheev or didn't have a Sheev? Like actual Senator Palpatine,
I don't have
unemperored.
I don't have the actual Sheev, but I do have two emperors. I have him from Revenge of the Sith, which I just got, and him from Return of the Jedi, and
Did you
his
see the one
throne.
I sent you recently from that antique store?
Yeah, that was cool. I like
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
But yeah, there's a lot of really cool Star Wars crossover in it, and with this movie. But it is pretty cool that Johnny Depp did this whole stunt here, and how they shot that was
Yeah,
pretty
that's like
cool.
the coolest stunt
Yeah,
too. When I was younger, there's like that was one of my favorite. Not from this movie, but that being drugged behind specifically like a carriage
yeah.
was one of my favorite things to pretend to do in the yard. I from Indiana Jones and
Which
Maverick,
is cool to
the Mel
visualize just the
Gibson
rolling
Maverick.
around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so cool.
Um, Historically, Ichabod Crane was a very unattractive man. Johnny Depp offered to add prosthetics to his face to make himself look ugly, but director Tim Burton wanted to base the character on Crane's more unattractive personality traits, his reported squeamishness and intricity. Um, yeah. Uh, it's funny. He is described in the animated movie, which I don't know if you've seen. It's on Disney Plus, um,
Uh-uh.
where he has the long nose and big features and stuff like that. Um, and it is kind of playing against type to have Johnny Depp do it, who is recognized as being a handsome man, and then they lean more into the the personality traits and his weird little quirks that honestly are great comedic bits in the movie. They add a
Yeah,
lot of flavor
yeah,
to it.
works a
Um,
lot. Works well.
yeah. The fake forest built on the sound stages became real forest by the time they wrapped. They became infested with birds and bugs, said Tim Burton. The sound of birds in the movie are often that of real, uninvited creatures that had made their homes in the trees. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that the entire set, again, the atmosphere of this movie is great, but the set design, the production design, all it looks incredible. It looks like a real forest. Like I want to go to that forest.
I agree.
I,
It was noticeable. I agree.
mhm.
I thought that really from the opening scene,
Yeah.
and then Ichabod's journey with the opening credits also stood out to me.
Oh yeah. The crazy the score is perfect by Danny Elfman, and then like the smoke and stuff like that when the titles clearing out. Yeah, it's yeah, it's a nice little details.
Yeah.
Uh, the town of Sleepy Hollow was created from the ground up in 3 months. At the time of filming, it was the largest set built in England and was put up in record time. The last set was held with the record was built for Billy Elliot. I said that held this record was built for Billy Elliot, and it's a gigantic set, and it looks beautiful and gorgeous.
Yeah. I went to California last month, and one of the things we in Los Angeles we did not have time to do was take like a studio tour, and
Mm-hmm.
I would love to go back and do that just to kind of get a little more.
See what it's like.
um yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I've always wanted to do something like that. Tim
Hmm.
Burton included scenes as homage to Disney's animated version of the Sleepy Hollow Tale. It's featured in The Adventure of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. You should totally check this out, by the way. It's a fun watch. Um, these included the scene in which Ichabod Crane crosses the covered bridge and hears the frogs underneath croaking Ichabod and Headless Horseman. Which Tim Burton, he comes from animation and he animated famously for Disney back in the day. Um, and this is apparently one of his big inspirations was this. The following chase sequence where Ichabod is run down and unhorsed apparently by the headless horseman with a flaming pumpkin, and at the moment in the cinematic chase scene in which Ichabod runs into a tree limb and thrown through the air, ends up landing on the horseman's horseback, on the horseman's horse backwards. I can't read. Um, yeah, I like
Hmm.
those. I like those little details, and I noticed especially the Ichabod, the toad's croaking underneath. I like that a lot. It's a creepy little detail.
I think I noticed with the subtitles.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Subtitles. Thank you, Paramount Plus. Um, the exteriors were shot with a blue filter, and you can tell in this movie. So, but the blood uh,
Yeah.
so for the blood to appear red, the liquid used had to be bright orange. And on the set, when you watch like the behind the scenes stuff, they're all covered in orange paint. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And then when you see it in the movie, it's like bright red, you know. Um, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's a cool way to shoot. I love the blue filter. And it really makes the orange really makes that red pop.
Yeah. Um, I like it. I like it as a tool too. I mean, it definitely creates the right feeling when used correctly. I mean, Ozark used it
Mm-hmm.
like the whole. I was reading a review of Ozark recently. I love Ozark, by the way, but they were like, "This is the bluest show I've ever seen in my life." And it's so it's like it's so blue.
It's like Rise of Skywalker
um,
shot with that blue filter.
yeah, and then there was an episode of House. House was one of my favorite TV shows, and it was not shot with a filter, but there was one episode that was particularly kind of dark and um was like a big episode where something big happens. No spoiler. Uh, and it was shot in a blue filter, and you could just tell from like the opening of the show where it was like, oh, this is a different episode. This one's weird.
This feels different. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that's cool with the blood. It definitely was effective.
Yeah, very effective. While director Tim Burton admired Andrew Kevin Walker's original script, He hired famed playwright and Academy Award winning screenwriter Tom Stoppard as script doctor. Stoppard did an uncredited rewrite to tone down the violence of the Walker script. So Andrew Kevin Walker did the script for Seven.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was his big thing. So I can imagine this movie probably used to be a lot more violent. But then they had, I think, Tom Stoppard's big credit is Brazil. I think he did that movie. I think that's the one he won the Oscar for. I think. Um, I can't like.
Mhm.
I feel like if you this movie's like perfectly balanced with its violence. Like it's over the top and goofy. I think if it were to be a more violent, it would lean into being just graphic and it wouldn't have the same tone and it would kind of ruin the tone a bit. So toning down the violence, I think was a good call.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, just us talking about it, I think you can tell from our conversations. I think like I keep discounting the violence when I say things, and I feel like you were more aware of the violence. What you know what I mean? And like that's interesting. Like and I'm discounting the violence in a positive way. I mean, it feels like again like the movie surprised me. I was maybe it was because of my expectations, versus whatever. Um, but it took me a minute. My expectations were this is going to be a very scary, graphic horror movie, and it
Yeah.
turned into this more nuanced project. And I think if you had upped the violence, it may have been closer to what I expected. But then the other charm of the movie like just wouldn't have played as well. It would have felt jarring, and the tone would have been like our review probably would have said it didn't know what it wanted to be
Yeah.
if it did that
And
well.
that's the thing that makes this movie like really good is it knows exactly what it wants to be and it strikes that perfect balance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
This is the first adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow that doesn't involve the actor playing the Headless Horseman having to conceal his head in a cloak. Thanks to the advancement in technology, the head of the actor was covered with a blue mask that was deleted by means of computer graphics. The collar was also created with CGI to match the flow of the robe. It looks pretty seamless.
Looks pretty good. Most of this movie
Yeah.
looks pretty good. The headless. I mean, obviously, it's tough to like when you see things that aren't real. It's always tough to be like, oh man, that's not what a headless guy walking around looks like. Like
Like
I
everyone has
mean,
an
how many
idea.
headless guys have you seen walking
Yeah.
around? Yeah, or like like or anything that's like if you get into like fantastical, like that's not what a dragon looks like. Like it's like, well, what would real look like,
Yeah.
and but so I mean, yeah, he looks kind of goofy, but he's supposed to look kind of goofy, and also he doesn't have a head. I mean, he looks like he's wandering around like, yeah, he doesn't have a head, and like so but I think in terms of because you're obviously my eyes are drawn to where his head should be the entire time. The
Yeah.
collar was a nice choice because it again draws your attention even more. Um, and I honestly was watching it cynically, like wanting to shit on it, and it was like, no, it looks pretty good. Really, the whole movie looks pretty good. I mean, especially the practical stuff, like when he's inspecting the head
Yeah.
and
Looks.
or the lack of head.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things, when it starts to get real,
The end
jumping
where
in and
he
out of the
puts
tree, which looks okay, or
the head back on. Some of those VFX look a little weird, and then the shot.
the lady and that her eyes come out and they say that's
Yeah,
a little Beetlejuicy, but
the shots of
but again, I mean,
the bird, the cardinal. I think
yeah,
it's not real,
yeah,
and it does look not real. But
yeah. But
yeah, I
some of
think
it, a lot of it does look good,
yeah,
and for
I think it,
1999, it looks fine. The whole movie
yeah,
looks good, looks fine.
yeah. For 1999,
Of course,
it looks
1999
great.
looks significantly better than now. I mean, or we've been on a downhill trajectory since 1993.
uh, director
After Jurassic Park was made, we're just going to get worse and worse.
worse and worse.
I'm just
Well,
kidding.
James Cameron would disagree with you, sir.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, forget not him.
Yeah. Uh, Director Tim Burton says the film was inspired by gothic horror films of Bava and Hammer Film Productions. Burton brought Hammer veteran Michael Gough out of retirement for a small role. That's, by the way, do you know who he is?
No.
That would be Alfred from the original Batman movies. Um,
Hmm.
and recruited Sir Christopher Lee, a veteran of Hammer and Baba's films, for a cameo because he played Dracula back in the day.
Ah.
And he definitely, I mentioned that at the beginning. I mean, all of Tim Burton's movies kind of have that gothic aesthetic to them. But he
Yeah.
really evoked the Hammer films perfectly, I thought. I mentioned this earlier. Ray Park, who created his best known role as Darth Maul, episode 1, in the same year, was fighting and stunt double, or was the fighting and stunt double for the Headless Horseman. Tim Burton credits Park for giving the character a great sense of movement. The character doesn't have a head, so you don't have much else to go on. And he does. Like, he gives them a pretty good sense of movement, and it could easily come across as being goofy, like especially when he's like flailing the swords and stuff like that, and he has no head, and it looks kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But he does a pretty good job.
Yeah, it does. It's. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Last fun fact we'll get to: Winona Ryder was offered the role of Katrina Tassel, but turned it down. I don't know how real this is. I mean, her and Johnny Depp dated back in the '90s, early '90s, off of Edward Scissorhands. They had a very highly publicized relationship. Maybe it would have been a little weird to return with your ex to a movie. I don't know. I don't know how real this is, but that to me seems more appropriate than the. As much as I love Christina Ricci, the original goth girl of the '90s, um, the age gap has always kind of thrown me off a bit because I think she was 18 or 19 when they filmed this, and Johnny Depp's like
Mm-hmm.
35, 36. And so it's just that
Yeah,
it's a
that's weird.
little weird, and it doesn't it's not as believable to me as like a Winona Ryder who's around the same age. It would have probably been better, made more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, would have been interesting to see Winona Ryder do this movie. All right, guys. Well, let's move on to our award section, and we're going to start off with best scenes and moments. Uh, have 11 here, so let's get through them. Ichabod stands up for science and logic at the beginning of this movie. It kind of shows you a little bit more into his character and kind of gets you
Agree.
into a sense of who he is and what he stands for. He's somebody that doesn't really have much faith, and he believes in science, logic, and he seems to be really
I agree. Is it? I mean,
firmly planted in that.
yeah. It. I didn't know. Again, I don't. Are you familiar with the short story? I mean, I'm not familiar. Do you know it,
I know it. Yeah,
or do you? I mean, like, is that part of Ichabod's character in that, or is that fleshed out in this movie a
it's
little more?
fleshed out in the movie a little bit more from memory, from what I remember.
Because like so, the movie starts. Obviously, you see the headless horseman.
Yeah,
Oh, that's who that is, and then you see, oh, this we're introducing, Ichabod, none other. Um, so I know this is Ichabod. Your notes say Ichabod.
yeah, no, Ichabod. It's Ichabod. My dyslexia is
Yeah.
kicking in, dude.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I do that
I
all
don't
the
know much
time.
about Ichabod besides the fact that he's in. That's a funnier name.
Ichabod.
Ichabod Thornton. The, uh, I don't know much about him, but this is quick. It works well for the timeline, like in terms of like late 1700s. That makes sense in terms
Yeah.
of what his views are. They're cool. He seems you start to realize he's ahead of his
Well, it plays
time.
into the whole
He's got
like
a he's
idea of like,
conflict.
oh my god, a woman knows how to do mathematics. She must be a witch. Burn her, kill her. It plays into a little bit of that. She knows how to
Yeah,
read. What? Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah,
plays into a lot of like that illogical fear and that kind of stuff. And he's somebody who's kind of ahead of the curve. Um,
yeah. It's quick. It's simple. It gives us the details we need.
and then he has to
Moves on.
deal.
I appreciate it.
It's a good way to start off of putting someone like that in a story like this that involves the supernatural, and it's taking everything and not being able to explain it.
Yeah,
Taking a character that likes to be based on logic and science, and then you put him in this supernatural world, and it's just like, what is this? I don't know how to operate in this world. Um, a title sequence and Ichabod travels to Sleepy Hollow. I love this. The music.
yeah, yeah. It was noticeable and well done. It was
Mhm.
one of those things that'll show up under crazy credits under IMDb, but they're not crazy. They're just
Yeah,
good.
they're just really, really good. The Headless Horseman backstory, great. Love it. Christopher Walken, the entire time that he doesn't say a single word. I wonder if it's
Yeah, the file.
the teeth.
Yeah, man, that wigs me out every time I see that. I don't remember what else I've seen that in. I'm sure. I mean, that's definitely a trope that's been used once or twice, but
Yeah.
it makes me uncomfortable to think about biting your tongue or something. It just wigs me out.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Imagine eating with those teeth.
Oh my god, I can't eat an apple. I eat a lot of apples. I have practice, and I bite my lip eating apples. I'd say 75% of the
Yeah.
time. I'd bite my tongue off.
God. Yeah.
It's just
Maybe that's why he doesn't speak. he has accidentally bit his tongue off. Um, Ichabod investigates Matt's best murder again. His little the eccentric behavior is funny and cool and just adds so
was it
much again to a character that could be kind of one note. It adds a lot more to him. And then the prancing around on the horse wearing the big like not sunglasses but the glasses and everything like that.
with the magnifying the telescope thing on
Yeah.
it? Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah, that's always funny when they even all his tools and stuff
Yeah.
they lend well to Tim Burton's like the little
Yeah.
thing that curls on
Yeah.
top and
You must never move the body.
um yeah, that probably if I could again, if I was 11, 12, if I was in middle school watching this movie, that head part or the lack of head where he's inspecting like the
Blood crawls
inside
out.
would be like probably like my favorite part. I'd probably like love that part. Be like, oh, dude, you were watching this part. It's so cool.
uh the day or the death of the magistrate Phillipsby, I think is his name. There is no headless horseman and there will never be a horseman, and then you just see him come out
yeah,
and he thinks the cross will protect him, and his head spins around. it's
yeah.
it's great. The thunder, the lightning adds a lot to it. um yeah, it's great. um Ichabod encounters the witch in the forest. I just this scene always stuck in my head as a kid, even after watching. This was the thing that I remember the most as a kid watching it was sitting next to my brother, Chris, and when the eyes and the tongue pop out, seeing him jump up and like get legitimately freaked out, and me thinking it was the funniest thing ever, but also like it still gets me every time I watch it. It makes me jump a little bit, you know. And it's also really creepy too, atmospheric, but it's also like again, I've mentioned this already, but Johnny Depp Ichabod just putting the kid out in front of him and holding the gun behind
Yeah, that's funny.
him. It's just so funny.
Yeah, yeah. It's also funny when he's like, "We're leaving.
Yeah,
We're leaving right now,
yeah.
quickly."
We're leaving. We're leaving right now. Well, what's funny is when like he like goes to like push the kid out, and then he gets pulled back
Mhm.
in. And he's like that, and then the kid just runs out the door. Yeah, the Tree of the Dead. This sequence again. I think it's probably my favorite scene in the movie. Spoilers for what my favorite scene will be. But him finding the tree, just the design of the tree in itself is very memorable,
Mhm.
but also everything that happens when
Hatchet.
he cuts open the tree and sees the heads, and then digs the soil out and sees the head from the headless horseman is missing from the body. And then when you see the portal open up and you see like that bright orange light, I mean, it's essentially saying the horseman comes from hell, jumps through the
Mhm.
tree and comes out. It's so cool. It's so freaking cool.
It is cool, and that's not like my bag.
Yeah.
That's not my favorite type of thing. But I really particularly like the design of the tree, and I thought the scene of him chopping the roots of the tree with the
Yeah.
axe
The
and
blood
the blood
splattering on his
coming out. Like
face.
I mean, I knew it was something fantastical, but I didn't know exactly what was going on yet, and but I was intrigued, and um I liked the design. I mean, something about him chopping the roots and then being like veins or something, and like blood coming out was I was interested the entire time. It pulled me
Yeah.
in.
The horseman takes out the family slash horseman battles Ichabod and Van Brunt or Van Brute, whatever his name.
Ah, yeah.
Um, yeah, the him taking out the family is so uncalled for with the little boy, and I have questions about that. But
Mhm.
like,
That's probably one of the scariest parts of
yeah,
the
it's
movie.
brutal, and
Um,
then the fight itself too is interesting. Um, really well done. Could have come off as goofy seeing like a headless guy fighting, but it doesn't. It comes across as kind of
it's
threatening.
well
Yeah,
choreographed. It comes off as pretty.
pretty threatening.
Yeah.
Um, always loved it as a kid
Duel of the
when he gets
Fates.
stabbed and then flung upside down or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that was one of those over the top moments, but it made me like wince. Like I was like, oh
Yeah,
god, how bad did that
yeah.
hurt?
The windmill escape. Oh, but even before we move on to that, can we talk about how Van Brunt, Casper Van Dien, gets just straight up cut in half? He gets mauled. Maul,
Oh
mauls
yeah,
him. Yeah.
yeah. Well, did I just say out loud Duel of the Fates?
Yeah.
I didn't say. Did I say
I
that
don't
out
think
loud?
so.
Well, I was thinking about the fight, and I was just thinking they just needed Duel of the Fates to like play over it while they're the 2-on-1 fight, and then that's funny.
Yeah. But moving forward to windmill escape, great little beats of him cutting the ladder as he's going up the stairs. It's a little thrilling. The explosion is really well done,
Hmm.
really cool. Um, yeah, it's pretty thrilling.
Yep.
The carriage chase
Yep.
slash fight, really well done. It's got
Hmm.
a lot of thrills in it, but also got a lot of like physical humor in there as well. That
Hmm.
adds a touch of a flavor to it. Really like that. Again, the getting dragged behind the carriage is really
Right.
cool, and him flinging on the horse, landing backwards. Um, yeah, just really well done. And then last one I have is Horseman. His transformation, even though visually it looks a little wonky, it still looks cool. Um, and then the Horseman getting his revenge again. The kiss with the bite. It's like gets me. gets me.
Ooh, it does hurt, especially those teeth.
When you see like the trickle of blood go down, and then he jumps back in, and there's the detail of her hand being stuck in the tree.
That's
Yeah,
cool. That is cool.
yeah. What's your favorite out of all these?
You know what? I'm gonna tap into my 11-year-old self. Like I said, I'm gonna say when he investigates Mazbeth's murder, I think that moment, and it's not that big of a deal. I mean, I'm not. I mean, it was a good use. I mean, it was good practical effects with the headless corpse on the ground, and it was a great blend of everything that Tim Burton's bringing to the movie with some
Mm-hmm.
gore and violence, with quirkiness of the uh like the telescope glasses that he's wearing and everything. It was just kind of like all things that are good about this movie kind of in one scene. And it was pretty funny. It was funny, and it was just the best blend. I felt like in a 60-second period, it was blended very well, and it moved the plot along a little bit.
Good scene. Good scene. Yeah, for me, it's the Tree of the Dead. Just reiterating what I already said for that one. That's a good one,
Mm-hmm.
Walker. Worst scenes and moments. For me, I have Jeffrey Jones' wig slash just in fact everything about him as a person in general. We don't have to go into it here, but screw that guy. And then the romance subplot. Those aren't like scenes and moments, but like it feels again the age gap has always been a little weird to me, but it's also like
Yeah,
the fact that uh the fact that it doesn't really add anything to the story. She could have just been a friend looking out
I
for him, and it would have been just as fine.
I agree. I always appreciate when movies don't feel a need to force that too.
Yeah,
It always feels like a step. Like I mean, I imagine studios. Maybe it's choices, but I imagine studios a lot of times like we need a love interest. We need a love story
yeah,
too going there. Like audiences like love
yeah, and
stories,
we do.
and you just
Like
kind of
I
put
love
one in
love
there
stories,
that's.
but good ones.
I know, but I've always appreciated movies that don't. If they don't need one, it's not like over pushing it on you because I agree, and that's gonna be my choice for the worst. That portion of the movie did very little for me.
Yeah. To be different, I'll choose Jeffrey Jones. Just everything about him as an individual. But otherwise, yeah, I would agree with you on the romance subplot. Um, Best performance, it's Johnny Depp. He had so much to the character.
It's definitely Johnny
Yeah, he had
Depp.
so much to the character. There's so many like funny details in this movie that I think are just him doing stuff, improvising, and he adds a lot to it. To a character that could be one note.
Speaking of Johnny Depp, we turned around in his driveway in Los
Oh
Angeles.
wow.
Yeah, he lives on Sweetser, and like the reason we know that is because of the Depp Heard trial that was on in his
Yeah.
house for 6 straight months. Um, they said Sweetser, Sweetser, Sweetser. They just kept saying it over and over. Your house on Sweetser Drive or whatever. And we passed over Sweetser, and it was very close to our hotel. And Jessica was
Missed a turn or something like that.
like Sweetser, that's where he lives.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's where he lives. And I was like, okay. She kept talking about Sweetser, Sweetser. Should we go down Sweetser? And it's like, well, like the entrance is kind of private. It's not private, but like he lives in the hills, right? Like
Yeah.
so it's very windy and tight and very difficult to get up there. And he's not very far up there. And like we needed to go here to this restaurant on the left, and she missed it. And I was like, I need to turn around. And then I was like, well, turn around, turn around. And then she kept going. I was like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm trying to find a place to turn around. And then she hits Sweetser. And I'm like, oh, I know what you mean. And and then she's like, no, I'm just going to turn around here. And I was like, all right, like a U-turn. And she's like, well, and then she turns on to Sweetser, and it's like, okay. And then all of a sudden, she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. The road's about the size of a golf cart path,
Oh
and it's
no.
extremely windy, and she can't like back up. We're like stuck, and it's like the only way to go is to keep going. And I'm like, well, why don't you just back into there, back into there? She's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And it's like, I think she did. I think it was a very difficult drive, but I think all of a sudden we made it to the end of Sweetser and found a place to turn around, and it happened to be Johnny Depp's driveway. and
A
um,
lot of like,
um,
how did this happen? I don't know. Yeah, kind of like.
yeah. It's like I don't know what to do. I don't know. It's driving itself. We just end up in this driveway.
Oh no,
Um,
I did. Yeah, that's funny. That's really cool. But yeah, Johnny Depp, best
mm,
performance. What can you do? He's good. He's really
yeah.
good in this. Does this make sense? Award. Why didn't Masbeth just stay in his like little deer stand instead of just running off? I mean, that scene itself is pretty cool. It almost made the cut when like he has the torches lit and then they just one by one go off. It's like the four little
Oh yeah,
torches
yeah,
and the
yeah,
one by one go off and you see the
yeah.
wisp of the smoke and stuff like that or the fog. Um, that was cool. But like, why didn't he just stay in there?
Good point. Yeah,
Yeah. Why
good
didn't he
point.
just stay? How did Ichabod know how to cut to find the heads in the tree? Was there something like I missed
I
there?
don't
He just
know.
started axing away at the tree.
Yeah, and again, I was like I said during the best scene, I was confused by it, but I just kind of was like
Hmm.
interested because the design of the tree was cool.
Yeah, like maybe something was buried in there. Maybe that's what he was looking for. I don't know. Um, why did Lady Van Tassel fake her death? The whole plot of that just seems really silly since there's no indication that Katrina had a will and there's no guarantee that the estate would go directly to her recently deceased stepmom. So like why fake your death? Like the whole series of not killing her first and then killing her husband, like like all of that just seems maybe she just wasn't a very good planner.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I agree. You getting them?
your plan there is not it's not solid. It's not concrete. Still a little loose.
Mm.
Um, why did the headless horseman kill the kid? He wasn't on the hit list. The wife and the father were. The child was not.
I don't know because he's not killing. He's even when someone else gets in his way, he's only killing them when like he's in like he doesn't have a choice really.
Yeah, when he's being
Like in order
summoned
to
to kill
complete
that
his mission.
person. Yeah,
Yeah, he went right after that kid
yeah,
into the floor.
yeah. So
I like the way they filmed it though, where he broke the floor and reached down there and then walked out the door just putting something in his bag. I thought that was a nice little
yeah, if it were
cutscene.
Terrifier 3, it would have probably showed it. Which not
Sure.
not a series of movies that are really my thing. But um, yeah, out of all these things, which one is the
I think killing the kid.
you think on the kid? Yeah, because you can
Yeah,
kind of just say, well, like he kept getting attacked and he was getting stabbed through the floor, so he kind of just jumped out of the window, was going to take his chances running away
yeah,
and maybe finding some ground.
yeah.
Um,
I did have to split the movie. Like I didn't finish it on like the first
yeah,
night, and I finished it on another morning, which I never. I mean, sometimes it's just the way you got to
yeah,
do it, but it's never like the ideal way to watch a movie. Um, and like at the beginning of the scene, I got kind of confused. This was around the split, I think, and at very first, I thought this was a like a flashback to I about called him Sweeney Todd Ichabod when he was a kid and like with his mom. I thought we were like continuing that story sort of for a
Ichabod.
second,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I got you.
yeah. I don't know. For the heads, I think you can kind of excuse because you just well, he had a feeling, a gut instinct. I don't know. Lady Van
Mm-hmm.
Tassel, maybe your plan was it thorough. So yeah, I agree with that one. Why did the headless horseman kill the kid? Just it negates everything else he does throughout the movie. MVP, I think it's Rick Hendricks who did production design. Um,
That's a good choice. I wouldn't have
yeah,
thought about that. That's a good choice. It obviously looks great. I mean, I'll go Tim Burton. I think Tim Burton. Um, I'm not saying this is my favorite project of his, but I think this is just kind of him at his Tim Burtonist, like just creating, like blending these genres and creating an atmosphere that's unique. And I think that's what makes this story as a movie work.
Yeah, it's not a bad choice. He would be my second choice. I think the reason I lean towards Rick Henricks is because the vibe, the feel, the aesthetic. Yes, it's very Tim Burton. He's the man behind all of it. But the production design on this movie is absolutely stunning. It's gorgeous, and it just puts you right into the mood of fall and Halloween and creepy. You
Definitely,
know, and just
definitely.
reading off his movies that he's done the production design of. You got Fargo, The Big Lebowski, uh, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, At World's End, The First Avenger, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Episode 8, Last Jedi, just to name a few that he's
Hmm.
done. I that's not all of them, but those are the ones that really stand out looking at his filmography. Um, so that's why I'd give him MVP. But Walker, at the end of the day, why would you recommend this movie?
Well, I mean, if you're a Tim Burton fan or a Johnny Depp fan or a fan of the duo, I think you'll enjoy this movie. I think it's definitely the upper end of their projects together. If you it just does it's a unique movie that blends genres. It's quite funny in certain parts. There's like subtle dark humor throughout it. It is spooky, as we've said a couple times, and it definitely, with the production design, creates a vibe for October and fall and Halloween season, and it kind of um, fills that void in a way that we're always ready to at this time of year. It's also it knows what it is, and it's not simple, but it's it finds a blend that works for itself, and it is a little spooky. It's violent, it's funny, and it works together, and nothing overfills the cup too much in one way or the other. Nothing. It doesn't leave you like wishing there was more of this or less of that throughout the movie. They find the blend that works really well. And then another thing is like just the script in general, while being a fantasy or supernatural story, it doesn't get too convoluted. It's somewhat simple. I mean, we're here for a spooky adventure, and the ride we're going to take is going to be through the production design and through the script and the quirkiness of the characters and the visuals. And we're going to tell a simple story. It's not going to get overly complex and twisty and turny. We're telling a story. And welcome to
Yeah,
October.
it's I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a perfect gateway to the month of October, the spirit of Halloween, getting creeped out, creepy vibes, the aesthetic, the feel, the vibe, all of it. And like you said, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also it's a very straightforward story while not being too convoluted and overly complicated. It's also a breezy hour and 45 minutes, um, which is
Yep.
just fantastic. It's fantastic. It's a good get you in, get you out kind of movie. Um, and again, it's just it is delightfully creepy, and that's why I think I would recommend this
Hmm.
movie.
Sounds great. Well, you got anything else for us?
Well, I got this lightsaber I want to show off, but that's it. That's it. I'm all done. I'm all tapped out.
uh, well, that does it for this week. Thank you for listening. If you're hearing us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thanks for watching. If you're catching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. What did you think of Sleepy Hollow? What's your favorite Tim Burton movie or Tim Burton Johnny Depp duo? What's your favorite Halloween movie or scary movie? But with that said, this has been Ben and Walker, and we'll see you next time.